right. All right, so hello and welcome to our virtual coffee lunch and learn. We are super excited to have you here. Just as a reminder, Virtual Coffee's mission is to be a welcoming tech community that allows for room for growth, mentorship at all levels, and create meaningful opportunities for learning, leadership, and contribution for everyone. So hence the lunch and learns, and hence our opportunities for our community to share what they know or share something they've learned. Just as a reminder, again, to find our code of conduct, events, or to learn more about Virtual Coffee, visit our site at virtualcoffee.io. So I'm going to introduce our speaker today. We have Justin. Justin, in 2013, left his boring enterprise developer position in the telecom industry and decided to jump into the exciting world of mobile app development. His own personal apps have not made him rich, so he's been a contract mobile app developer for many years, is now underemployed and just enjoying dabbling with a lot of new tech. So who knows what the future holds for Justin? I know lots of awesome things. So today's Lunch and Learn is called Web 0.1, Real Dinosaurs Use FTP. So it's kind of going backwards and looking at where we came from, and kind of thinking about how maybe your grandparents, and I use grandparents loosely because I remember this stuff, managed their websites in like the prehistoric era. We didn't have static site generators or command line tools, or easy to use version control systems with like a push to publish, nothing like that. So Justin is going to dive in with what life used to be like in this industry. So without further ado, Justin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen and I'll show you what we're going to talk about today. So give me a second. And all right, let's start here. Nope, that's not where we wanted to start. We wanted to start. Sorry, I had a few technical difficulties before we started today, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. Okay, so Web 0.1, Real Dinosaurs Use, and in all the stuff I had previously done, the description and everything, I said FTP, and smart dinosaurs used SFTP, and we'll describe the distinction between the two of those in a few minutes. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about. Basically, how did your grandparents or your brother or sister or cousins or whomever manage their websites back in the day? Previously, there were not a lot of easy technologies to use for managing websites. It was all a very manual process. Sometimes that included something as manual as VI or Vim, as some of you know, or Nano, where you literally logged into a remote server and you would type in your new code. It was very painful. Fortunately, even better things like FTP came along and SSH file transfer. So we're going to walk through a few things here about me, FTP, SFT, some very important security warnings, and hopefully we will get to actually show some FTP in progress. So a little bit about me, as Sarah read my bio, so there's that stuff there. I'm sort of kind of looking for work. I don't really want a full-time job. I'm looking for small contracts, developer advocate stuff. Maybe you wouldn't want me to present after today, but in case you love how I present here, I might be able to do it for you too. I'm a kind of a jack of all trades developer. I do whatever I got to do to get something done. And there's my social links. This whole presentation I'll make available to everybody after the show. So what is FTP? Here's a link to Wikipedia, and I'll let you read that. But basically, it is a standard communication protocol for transferring files between computers. And you can read that and it'll put you to sleep. But the real meat and potatoes about FTP is it allows one computer to talk to another computer and transfer files between them. The most important thing you'll ever read in this whole document right here about file transfer protocol is never use file transfer protocol. Okay, it was never designed to be a secure protocol. It's literally like never talk about Fight Club. And if I'd had time, I would have thrown that GIF in there, and I will do so after this presentation. You should never use FTP. There are lots of variations of names of FTP that make you think perhaps that's what I want to use, but I guarantee you they're not. There is FTPS, which is FTP SSL or FTP Secure. There's Simple File Transfer Protocol. Avoid that one like the plague. There's FTP over SSH. And the real deal, what you really, really want to use is SSH File Transfer Protocol, SFTP. Now, as you can see, SFTP and Simple File Transfer Protocol look really similar, but they are not the same thing. And here's my very strong warning there. In the modern world, no developer should be using anything other than SSH File Transfer Protocol. The technicalities of that, I'll let you dig into those, but SSH File Transfer Protocol is the only thing you should be using nowadays. Okay, what is SFTP, the SSH File Transfer Protocol? Blah, 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 blah. SFTP attempts to be more, and it's going to put you to sleep. Okay, again, the TLDR is it allows one computer to talk to another and transfer files over a secure connection. That's the key thing you want to get out of what is SFTP. And again, pretty much don't use anything else. I mean, short of you're in a room and you've got two servers and neither of those servers is connected to the internet, fine, use whatever you want to. A USB stick if you really have to, or FTP if that's all you got. But in the modern world, do not use anything other than SFTP. Okay, security warning. The activities demonstrated in this presentation were performed by a highly trained monkey. And the funny thing about that is apparently I'm not as highly trained as I might like to think. Last night and this morning, I set up a demo server and I created accounts for everybody so y'all could log in and we would all get to interactively work with secure file transfer. And this morning, about 40 minutes ago, I realized that my server had been hacked. And I'd known it was a possibility. I had intentionally set up my server in the way that I did so that I could point out that these are not the things you want to do. The problem with that is that computers and hackers have scripts that will literally scan the internet all day long, every day, and they will look for a couple of things. One is any IP address, and they will hammer that IP address with more scripts that will look for open ports. And as you can tell, I didn't get to finish typing this slide together because I was frantically trying to recover my server. But SSH generally defaults to what's called a port, and that port is 22. Everybody knows that. And in the old days, people used to try to do security by obscurity. They would try to hide their SSH port, changing it to 257 or 16,372, whatever. And their goal there was the naive attempt that, well, hackers are only going to try port 22, and if they don't find it, they're going to move on to some other sucker. Well, with today's computers and scripts and capabilities, they can scan thousands of ports in literally a few seconds. And so they don't just try to hit port 22, they try to hit any open port. And when they do that, and they realize that that's an SSH port, then they start hammering it away with like rainbow stripe, I forget the word, but basically striped passwords. They just shove thousands of passwords in trying to hit root. So there are some very common guidelines about what to do if you allow SSH access to any computer on the internet. And the most important one of all is do not allow root SSH access at all, okay? In most modern environments where you're using a virtual private server, you've got DigitalOcean or Linode or whoever, you don't need SSH access, period, particularly for administration tasks. What they have a secure console that you can log in from the website, and nobody can get to that secure console because it's behind their firewalls. So by default, you really should not enable SSH unless you need to. If you do need SSH, do never ever allow the root user to have password access. What that means is they might log into their, you might try to SSH into a server, and it's going to prompt you for a password. Well, the root user should never be allowed to enter a password. That is incredibly dangerous. What you want to do is, if you do need to get access to a server, again, don't let the root user ever do it. Instead of using passwords at all, you should use an SSH key. And so you require the user to have their encryption, their SSH key. You upload their public key to the server, and they would connect with their key instead of a password. And that really eliminates a lot of the risk, because the hackers can't shove thousands of keys at you a second like they can with passwords. Then once a user is in, then if they really need to, they can get root access by doing sudo. And again, that's another great security thing, in that with a Unix or Linux-based server, the user can't get root access unless they're in the sudoers file. So the administrator can say, okay, Becky has root access, Bob doesn't. Okay, so if somebody gets in, at worst, they may be able to poke around a few files, they maybe even write a few files, but they're not going to be able to do the stuff that a very proficient and an admin user could do, like change passwords, delete users, restart the server, add other functionality. And what's so important about this on the internet is that improperly secured servers can be used in botnet attacks, malware attacks, that kind of thing. And you don't want your own server to become a host for malware or hackers using it for Bitcoin mining or any other nefarious purposes. Okay, so again, that did happen to me this morning. And so I'm not going to be able to give you all access to be able to upload files to my server. And right now, I can't even get, I messed up. I didn't log all my configuration steps yesterday. It's been a while since I've done this. And I can't even get SSH access except via my my SSH keys. So, but we're going to do a few things anyway. And then I'm going to struggle through and see if I can get this working to demonstrate FTP to you. Okay, so let's look at something here. I've got a Linux server running, and by default, I just installed Nginx on it. Now, if you're not familiar with Nginx, it is basically an HTTP server that serves static HTML pages. And then some alternatives to Nginx are Apache. There's many others, Windows Server, I don't remember what it's called. But this by default is the Nginx welcome page saying, hey, you've successfully managed to get Nginx up and running on this server. So clearly this isn't what we want to see on our website. So in the past, somebody that gets access to a brand new server and needs to modify that server and get it up and running to present a client website, they got to get rid of this somehow. And one of the most basic ways of doing that is to, I'm going to, as you can see, I'm in here as root right now, intentionally. And let me see if I can make this bigger. Is that big enough for everybody to see? Can you see it okay?
Looks good for me.
Okay, so I'm at the command prompt of a Linux server running on DigitalOcean. And you can see I can do stuff like ls-la, and there's all my files, and I can change directory to var www. And in most servers, even Apache, Nginx, almost always everything for your website is in www. And this directory here, HTML, I'm going to change directory into it. And I'll do an ls-la. And there is my default HTML page. So again, I got to update this thing a little bit. So how do I do that? Well, I always use VI. Other people use Vim or Nano. And I'm going to do VI and I'm going to do index dot. Let's see if I've got autocomplete. I do. And there is my rather boring HTML website. So if you had no other tools, you would literally come down here and you would use your keyboard, not your mouse, and you would get rid of words here. And I would say, and then I would use Vim or VI commands, which you may or may not be familiar with. And I could save this, which with the WQ command, which means write and quit. And then I can go back to my server. And if I reload, blank, 1 second, make sure I'm on the right server, 104.248.3.170. That is the right server. I don't think it's a caching problem, but let me do something real quick.
I think you updated the tab title, not the title on the page. I noticed that's.
Is that what I did? Thank you so much. You're exactly right. I'm glad you caught that. I would have been like, what in the world did I do? All right, so let's do that again. I'm going to insert and we'll do insert virtual coffee. And now I'm going to save it. And now, thank you so much, Sarah. Okay, so I say virtual coffee there. And as you can tell, that was quite a painful experience. And all I was doing was changing text. Can you imagine typing tags in here and no autocomplete and good luck getting any indentation working? It is just an absolute nightmare. Unfortunately, some people used to do this. So that's what this used to look like. Okay, if you want to, you can go directly to this. I'll send this in chat. You can go to this website here and hopefully it doesn't work for you. I'm hoping your browser says this website's not secure. Are you sure you want to continue? And it makes you jump through a lot of hoops to do that. If your computer does let you do that, you need to change that. It's really not a good idea anymore for you to allow your browser to go to non-secure websites. If it is doing that, then I can give you some documentation in this presentation after the fact that will stop that. You want that bit of security. So what I've done for anybody that is blocked and can't get to it, I've basically mapped this through my domain name service, and I've pointed a CNAME to it. So you should be able to get to it right there. And everybody should be able to get to that new URL. Okay, so obviously we don't want to keep doing something like this, but now we're kind of at a dead point. I cannot get access to the command line. Let me try. Again, this should have gone a lot more smoothly, except for my problem. But let me try to do this, and give me just a second. And let me copy. And sorry, I'm also using a new terminal, and I probably should not have chosen yesterday to start implementing this, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. SSH. -I. Oh, all right, I'm going to have to dig up my notes here, so give me a second.
I appreciate you doing Office Justin Live for us, because it genuinely makes me feel better about my personal process on things like this. Things break all the time, things happen, and I think it definitely highlights that we just have to do things on the fly sometimes. So I just want to say I'm very appreciative of that, and
Well,
I'm sure
thank you.
as well.
Yes, same, all good. It's fun when you're trying to sort out stuff like this, even if it can be nerve-wracking sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna try to do this in another terminal, and let's see if it works. And no, good. Okay, let me try to fix my server. Oh, one thing y'all didn't get to see, and let me show you that. I'm going to go to I'm going to delete this file or part of this file here. Okay, so if you were SSHing into a server, you would do it this way with a key. You would type in SSH -I means use an identity, and the path to your SSH key. And then you tell it who you are. And in this case, I'm root. And then you tell it the IP address that you want to connect to. All right. And you're going to, if this works, you're going to get a scary warning right away. And okay. And this is what you're going to see. The authenticity of host 104, blah, 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 can't be established. ECDSA key fingerprint is, and it gives you a SHA key. And it asks, are you sure you want to continue connecting? Now, what this is saying is that your computer has never connected to this host before, or more scarily, it has connected to this host before, but its SSH key has changed. And if it has changed, that is a big security warning to you. Do not ever blindly say yes to this, okay? Now, I know that because I just deleted it from my what's called my known hosts file, that I've never connected to this host before. So I know it is safe to say yes, okay? Again, this is not something like you're accepting the end user a license and just click, 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 yes, yes, yes. Literally, if somebody hacks into a computer and does something to it and changes the configuration, and you try to log in like you do every day to your work server, and you get that warning, then something is seriously wrong. Do not proceed and without further investigation. They may steal your credentials. They may do other things. Be very cautious about that. So I say yes, and I can connect. And this is the problem I'm having right now, is that every time I connect, I keep getting this too many authentication failures. And I solved this yesterday, and I forgot how I solved it. So give me a second, and I'm going to dig into that. So give me a second. Literally, it's been years since I've had to configure a server. So I am poking around and trying to remember how to do this kind of stuff. Okay. Now, something you don't normally see. Oh, no. Okay, let me show you something. This kind of explains why I'm having this trouble. I'll show you. This is my SSH directory. I have a lot of keys for various reasons. And normally, I mean, this is quite abnormal. Most people don't have this many keys. These are from years and years of various situations. And what happens is when you try to SSH into a server, it just goes through your keys file. It starts with what's considered your default, and it attempts to authenticate with it. And if that fails, then it finds another one and attempts and attempts and attempts. And after so many attempts, it finally says, whoa, something's wrong here. I'm not letting you try anymore. And that's the problem you see I've got right here. Now, normally, because I'm specifically saying which key I want to use, I wouldn't expect this to be happening. But in this case, it is, and I'm not quite sure why. Now, if I were logging in as a user, I would tell SSH not to use a key. And let me show you what that would look like. So I would say SSH, don't use public key authentication, okay? And that would bypass this whole automatic attempt that SSH tries to do. And it would just say, skip all that crap. And let me just log in as with username and password. So I'm going to try that one more time. And I'm going to, let me get my IP address here again. Really don't like that about warp. And let's see if I have any luck this time. Hey, oh my gosh, we might be in. And let me find my list of passwords. I feel like a hacker right now. I think my family would be so proud of me because my whole life they've thought I was a hacker. And oh crap, I suck at hacking. That's my problem.
You gotta take the red pill. Take the red pill.
Okay, we're gonna do one more thing. And let's get rid of you. And let's get rid of you. Did I get logged out? Okay, I'm gonna change this guy's password and see if that helps. Oh, well, that explains it. Again, I was having all kinds of trouble with this. So let's add this user again. Boink.
So I'm laughing in the chat. Travis put swordfish.
Try so. Oh no, it's not swordfish, fortunately. And now I have a user. Doink. And give it a password. And it's not P @ symbol SSW0. Okay, now let's see if we get lucky here. And okay, and let's do one more thing here. And I'm really sorry, guys. This is just beating me up. I'm going to go to etc. SSH. This is on the remote server. And I'm going to look at what's called the SSHD config file. And I'm going to confirm that it is configured to let me do a few things. And first off, okay. So I'm allowing password authentication. I've changed that to yes. Again, this is not a good idea. You would not normally want to let this happen. And I've got challenge response authentication turned off so that it doesn't automatically try to use. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Let's go back to that. Change yes to enable challenge response for reissue. Getting a little bit beyond my capabilities there, but I'm going to dig around in there. Public permission denied. And all right, try to add the key again. First to yes. Okay. And as usual, as a very highly trained software developer, you skip the question and you go right to the first answer. Always. Okay, that's my advice to all you junior developers. This is how you develop. Okay. So first, set password authentication to yes. I've got that, and then I don't want to do that. Now you can set pat. No, I don't want to do that. And that did not give me what I wanted. And password authentication equals no. All right, when you're not an admin or don't want to change your local, you can also pass around to the SSH command here. Password authentication. Well, let's try that because I've never done this here before. And we're going to give it a shot. It was asking me for my password, so I feel like I've already got that configured properly. Too many authentication failures. Okay, I'm going to try one more thing here, just in case I failed to do this before. I am going to, remember that never let root user log in with a password warning I gave you? That's how you do that. Do not allow that. Very dangerous. Okay, I got to close the chat because y'all are, that's distracting me. Okay, so what I'm going to do what?
It's all good stuff. We're loving watching this. We're really learning a lot. We're enjoying it, and we all agree that this doesn't happen often enough. Seeing stuff like this, so this is the guy. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to do a system control restart SSHD. SSHD is the daemon that's running that listens on port 22, and if it gets hit, it responds to requests and stuff on it. And I've changed my SSHD config at least once, and I thought I had restarted, but if you don't restart, then those config settings don't take effect, and then you're not going to be able to get in, or you won't be able to use them. So I'm going to try that one more time, and I don't need sudo because I'm already root. All right, and I think we've restarted, and I'm just going to start from scratch. One more thing. I'm going to add another user. I'm going to skip to 10 because I feel like maybe I messed up users 1 through 2. So I'm running a command here, user add. That's a Unix command to add a user. The user's name is VCIO10. And I'm adding them to a group I created called VCIO. And that just allows me to manage permissions a little more easily and give y'all globally a bunch of permissions instead of having to add them to each individual user. So I press enter, and now I have that user. The user has no password. They can't log in right now. So what I've got to do is assign a password to them. And I do that by using the password command. So I do password. They were really tight on letters back then. Back in the dinosaur area, it was hard to spell ORD. So we just skipped as many letters as we could. And let's put that password in there. And I'm going to repeat the password. And let's try one more time. I'm going to SSH -O, all that stuff. And I want to be VCIO10 at, and I just something's a little weird there with that IP address. Just want to reconfirm it and copy it. And there's my IP address. And let me get ready with my password. Okay, that's actually kind of good news. What's happening there is either my SSHD config has some invalid syntax in it, or my user profile got created with invalid syntax. So what I'm going to do, I am going to go to this user, and I'm going to go to home, and I'm going to go to VCIO10. And I'm just going to kill this user's setup. So I'm going to remove dot BA star, remove C dot C star, and rm-rf dot C star. I could have done all this one command, but I'm just being a little cautious. And rm dot profile. Okay, so this user's profile is pretty much blown out, and there's no risk of if they attempt to log in that their profile being the problem. And so now I'm going to try that again and get ready with their password. Let me get that on my clipboard. Okay, so the problem's not with their profile. It has to be some mistake I made in SSHD config. Fortunately, like any good developer should, I used version control. And you're going to see the dinosaur version of version control. So the old way of version control was you copied the file and you gave it its original name. So 2021-11-19 was the file before I messed with it. And same thing with SSHD config. So I'm just going to restore these guys to what they were. Now there's a bit of risk in this. I am in as root, and I shouldn't be. And so when I reconfigure this, if I lose my root connection, then I will have locked myself out of the server without being, or unless I go in via the DigitalOcean console. So I need to make sure in this particular window, I don't accidentally log myself out. So I'm just going to restore my SSH config and my SSHD config files to what they were. So I'm just going to copy and just overwrite what it had before. And let's say, let's echo, or let's just cat. It's saying I can't, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to delete SSH config. And then, it's not delete, it's del. Or no, it's not. I'm getting SQL mixed up with Unix command lines. I'm going to delete or remove SSH config. Okay, and now I'm going to copy my backup into SSH config. And now I'm going to remove SSHD config. That's another really thing I'm not liking about Warp right now. The terminal I'm using is that it doesn't copy on select, which I'm not a fan of. And now I'm going to copy my SSHD backup and make it SSHD config. Gosh, that's killing me. Okay, and then I'm going to restart my SSH server. So let's say system control restart. And now hopefully I solved whatever syntax issues I have. Now that doesn't solve the problem that my user is not going to be able to log in now because I don't have password authentication allowed, but we'll give it a try. So I'm again going to try to log in as VCIO 10, and it says permission denied public key. And that's actually a good thing. It didn't prompt me for a password, and that's because I wiped out my SSHD config that would have allowed that user to enter a password. So now that my SSHD config is kind of restored, I'm going to edit it again. Okay, so again, this setting right here, permit root login, yes, that's okay, sort of, but it's going to be with an SSH key. And I'm going to do a search. sorry. I'm going to go to the top of the file and I'm going to search for pass. Okay. And there it's, oops. There it is. Password authentication is set to no. I'm going to replace that. I'm going to insert in there yes. And I'm gonna save it and quit. WQ means write and Q means quit. And now I've got to restart the server again. When I say restart the server, I apologize. I'm not actually rebooting my host server. I'm just restarting the SSH daemon. Okay, and now let's see if I get lucky here. I'm going to try to log in as them, and I got too many authentication failures. So I'm running around in circles, everyone. I really do apologize for this. Too many authentication attempts. This one is beating me up. And again, it's because of my SSH keys. Let me see if I can find a better answer. Verbose. All right, well, let's do that in verbose mode. So I'm going to do -v, which is verbose mode. So it's going to spew a ton of garbage out and give us more information about why it failed. And as you can see there, what I talked about earlier, it's going to try all of my keys and there's just too many of them. And after a certain limit, I don't know what that limit is, it just says, whoa, no, you can't do that. And it just keeps going through my keys. So I'm going to do something a little bit drastic here. And I've got a backup. Again, always have a backup. And I'm going to make a directory SSH backups. And I'm not going to do it by hand. I'm going to use Finder. And I'm going to go into my SSH directory. And pretty much all these keys are going to go. I just want to move my unselect my known hosts. And I'm going to move that into, and I don't want to do config. Ladies and gentlemen, do not try this at home. Okay, so let's try this again. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to do it with -v. And hopefully, because I don't have all those keys in there, I don't know. Let's try this with -v. Okay, this is supposed to ignore my keys, but it wasn't for whatever reason. And let's go to 0. And it's asking for my password. We may have made a little progress there. And I still got kicked out. The password authentication succeeded. So my password's good. And sending command, echo, unset PS1. Okay, there's something with my bash profile that has something wrong with it. That's been this whole problem, this problem all along. And I don't know. Okay, so when a user first logs into any Linux or Unix based system, what's called their profile gets executed, or their RC file, or it depends on what shell is being used. And we're using a bash shell, and by default, it has this configuration, and it's bad. And something in here, and I don't know where this default configuration came from. I'm going to try to overcome that, and I know we're almost done. So I think at this point, I don't know that I'm going to solve that in 10 minutes. Let me just do one little thing, and then I'm just going to take questions and answers. I'll solve this. I'll record the video of it, and I'll let y'all see. So again, I wanted to go to var www, and I don't like that horribly ugly introduction y'all got there. And so I'm going to VI that file. And I'm just going to go to line 1, and I'm just going to delete all that crap. And I'm going to do insert, and I'm going to put something nice and pretty in there for y'all, if I can find it. And we're going to paste this in there. Okay, so notice I use tabs. And VI doesn't know what the heck I'm doing, and it doesn't know how many spaces I want. And as you can see, it's really ugly. And this is the benefit of FTP, is you're transferring entire files and not relying on VI to understand your syntax and things like that. Now, if you go back to our website and refresh, you'll have that. And I had meant for this to be one of the things I change. There's a bit of a joke about that. I have a really hard time spelling the word coffee. So I often go to virtualcoffee.com, and it used to always fail on me. So I bought that domain and I pointed it at the real virtual coffee, and it goes there. And I think it was, virtual. Okay, I've done something else wrong there. Oh, we're IO, right? Virtual coffee with 1 E. There we go. And it redirects to with 2 E's. And when I did that, and I mentioned it, somebody asked, well, what about virtual kofefi? And I think it was Dan or Nick. And so I wanted to make this a thing where y'all were all going to learn how to change this, and unfortunately that didn't happen. So again, everyone, I apologize for the problems I had. Again, the most important thing about all of this is that don't do this kind of thing in production. Make sure that you've got a lockdown system and you won't look like a fool during a lunch and learn. So I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I'll be happy to take any questions or tomatoes if you've got some.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. First off, I want to correct you. You do not look like a fool. You absolutely demonstrated what this is like, absolutely 100% what is normal. It helps us to set proper expectations for any early career, any juniors, anyone out there that's just getting overwhelmed in a moment, feeling like they're, imposter syndrome, everything. We've all been there. So seeing this has been really wonderful. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
I also want to say thank you so much for the dedication to Virtual Coffee, for buying the domain Virtual Coffee 1E and redirecting it to our site. I mean, you clearly love us.
Well, I had to, because every time I try to go to it, I go to the wrong thing, and it just pissed me off. So for $8, it saved me tons of effort.
Perfect. All right. Does anybody have any questions? Please don't hesitate to raise your hand, and we can ask Justin anything that came up, or just talk. We're a small group.
Curious if people still use FTP in some cases, because like when I was doing WordPress development, like that was, I mean, you can update through the admin, but like a lot of times, like I would just be pushing stuff up that way. And I feel like even though it's older, there's probably people still doing it to some degree. Hopefully not, but.
Yep, I'm sure there are. It is very dangerous. But you do what you got to do, and hopefully you're on a trustworthy ISP, and with any luck that won't be intercepted. But it is very dangerous. Yeah.
Travis, your hand up.
Yeah. So I know very little about FTP, or I guess generally protocols is not something that I've had to deal with yet. But I have been told that one of the key differences between FTP, or at least use cases between FTP and HTTP, or their secure variants, is that HTTP is much better suited for transferring small files securely, whereas FTP is actually more efficient, technically speaking, for transferring large files, but it's not as secure. I was wondering if you find that if you can confirm whether or not that is a logical statement, and if there are some key features or differences between the two that make that true or false, I guess.
Yeah, well, I don't want to. I'm going to expose limitations of my knowledge, but they're two incredibly different things. Okay, HTTP and FTP have totally different intents. HTTP is hypertext transfer protocol. It's literally designed to transfer textual data. That's it. Okay, and I'm going to say document, but not in the format of a file. Okay, and so that data or that document can be any data, but its goal is just to present it at another end. Or give access to it. Okay, FTP and secure FTP, its intent is literally to transfer a file. Okay, that's its job. It is to take a binary data and put it somewhere else. Okay, now you can transfer a file via HTTP and HTTPS. Okay, and what you're doing in that case, you're reading the file. In your web browser, your browser or node or whatever is literally reading the file, getting all of its binary data and streaming it across the internet. And the other end is taking that blob of data and then streaming it down into disk. But it's very inefficient compared to SFTP because you've got all the overhead, HTTP and FTP and Telnet, all of those, they break data into little chunks called packets. And for HTTP, there's lots of overhead about, what's in each packet and how big it is and, all kinds of things that beyond my knowledge. And it's designed for transmitting little chunks of data, relatively little chunks of data to transmit representational data effectively. Whereas FTP is designed for transferring large volumes of data, and it has a lot of retry mechanisms where if, 3/4 of the way through the file, one little bit didn't transfer properly, it has checking on each side, and every packet that comes through, it says, okay, this is the signature I'm sending you. And then FTP on the other end says, okay, that's the signature I calculated, we match, so that packet's good. Well, if one digit in there got mixed up, one bit, then FTP, the receiver says, oh, that packet's bad, give me another one. And that checking process is very efficient for transferring files versus HTTP. It also has that capability, that packet checking, but it's not for the same mechanism. So you can do it, but if you're really trying to move files, the better bet is to do it via a file transfer protocol versus HTTP.
Okay, that's really helpful. I had come under the impression that they were sort of competing ideas, that HTTP was somehow like an upgraded version of FTP, but that's not the case. They're meant to do two different jobs. They're two different tools. Okay, cool. Yeah. Thank you very much. That actually is clears up a lot for me.
Good. And anybody, if what I just said is totally incorrect, which it could be, but that's my understanding of it. Please feel free to update us, and I will rebut what I just said. So.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. It's 1 o'clock now, and to be cognizant of everyone's time, we're going to go ahead and cut it here, and we're going to expect to see part 2. Justin, thank you so very much. So I want to say goodbye and thank you for joining.
Thanks you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.